Meanwhile, the headlines from Turkey and Syria aren't getting better. The death toll has crossed 33,000. A week after the quake struck, the toll continues to rise. Rescuers are still on the ground trying to find survivors beneath the rubble. But after all these days, hope is dimming and the anguish is turning into anger. Anger at the shoddy construction work that led to so many buildings collapsing. Anger at the looters running riot. Anger at the Turkish government's slow response. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan will be facing an election this year. This may be the toughest in his over 2 decades in power. The earthquakes have exposed the systemic problems behind the construction boom he championed. Tonight we'll bring you the full story, starting with the miracles. Turkey has sub-zero temperatures as we speak. Entire cities have turned into rubble. Yet all these days later, people are still being found alive under the debris. Like this little girl. A woman and child were rescued in the city of Hatay on Sunday. They were found by rescue specialists from El Salvador. A man was pulled out of the rubble near the epicenter of the first quake. This was after almost 6 days of being buried. Look at him, pumping his fist in the air as he's lifted in a stretcher.
Hay maşallah be.
As heartwarming as these stories are, they're few and far between. For most others, it's already too late. The attention has turned to why so many were trapped in the first place. It's no secret that Turkiye is at high risk from earthquakes. The last big one was in 1999. More than 17,000 people died in that quake. The government took some decisions to avoid a repeat. It brought in new building laws, new rules to ensure that buildings don't crumple in the event of a quake. But that hasn't helped. Look at all the buildings that came crashing down. Evidently, the rules were followed only on paper, and the government did not help by offering amnesties. It let shoddy buildings stand for a fee. This worked for everyone. The government made millions in fines, and the builders got away with poor construction. Officials say there were 75,000 such buildings in the affected areas. 75,000 buildings were given amnesties. Do you know how many such buildings exist in Turkey? 13 million. This is according to the Turkish Environment and Urbanization Ministry. A report says half of all buildings in this country are in violation of regulations. The government is now going after the builders. It announced 113 arrest warrants on Sunday. It's all over the news. Videos of builders being arrested have flooded the media in Turkey. And while the builders are at fault, could they have done it without the support of the system? Are these arrests then just an attempt to deflect blame? The government is also targeting looters. Reports say there are squads roaming the affected cities. Many carry weapons and rob stores and houses left open due to the quakes.
İş yerimiz burada.
Our shops are here. Mine was looted because the back entrance collapsed. They stole the cash money and took 70,000 liras directly from the register. They took a few of the goods we sell, but they couldn't take much because the shelves were inside. They took the cash money instead.
President Erdogan has promised exemplary punishment for looters. The military is now patrolling the streets, but critics say he took too long in calling them, that he did not want to be too reliant on them. But he had to call them when it became quite clear that the government and the NGOs alone could not manage on their own. This delay may have resulted in even more lives lost. It has left the people of Turkey angry. In neighboring Syria, it's worse. Northern Syria is controlled by rebels, not the government. They're not getting the aid they need. They say the international community has let them down. Remember, they've already suffered more than a decade of civil war. The earthquakes are proving to be the proverbial last straw. The Syrian government wants all aid to go through official channels. But there are fears that the regime won't send it to the rebel-held areas. In the past, it has gone to rebels with a surrender or starve approach. So why can't the aid be sent directly to the rebels? Because of sanctions and UN politics. Sanctions stop anyone from dealing with the rebel groups, many of which are considered terrorists. And Syria's allies in the UN, Russia and China, play a role. In the past, Russia and China have vetoed aid being sent to the rebels. But now, because of the new crisis, some of those restrictions are being lifted, they're loosening. But what Syrians are getting doesn't even begin to cover what they need. Speaking of which, we have news on the BBC. The broadcaster is in trouble, but you already know that. The chairperson, Richard Sharp, is caught in a scandal. In the year 2020, he helped former Prime Minister Boris Johnson get a loan. Just after that, Johnson recommended him for the BBC chairperson's post. Was this quid pro quo for the BBC job? Was getting Johnson the loan a prerequisite for this appointment? It's been called a pals appointing pals, donating to pals situation. Sharp, of course, denies the charges, but a parliamentary committee has accused him of making significant errors of judgment. Here's a report on the scandal.
BBC chairperson Richard Sharp is in hot water. His undisclosed dealings with former Prime Minister Boris Johnson are out in the open. He helped the former PM get a loan worth almost $1 million and didn't disclose this information when he was being interviewed for his job at the BBC. Now, the House of Commons Digital, Culture, Media and Sport Committee has come out with a report. It has said Sharp made significant errors of judgment and that it has put the BBC's reputation at risk. Now, Sharp's ties with the UK's Conservative Party weren't a secret. The former Goldman Sachs partner was a major donor, having reportedly given the Tories about £400,000 or close to $500,000. During his investment banking days, Sharp even worked with current Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. He also acted as an advisor to Sunak during the pandemic, when Sunak was Johnson's Chancellor of the Exchequer. So when all this was in the public domain, why is Sharp under the spotlight now? It's because of the loan that could be considered a conflict of interest. You see, the BBC is the UK's public broadcaster. It's nominally independent, but being a public entity, its chairperson is recommended by the government of the day. To maintain a veneer of impartiality, the candidates are scrutinized by a cross-party panel. This is the House of Commons Digital, Culture, Media and Sport Committee. When applying for the post, the potential chairperson has to make any conflict of interest public. But Sharp did not do that. Let's look at the timeline of events. Johnson was in a spot of bother financially in 2020. A friend of Sharp's, multimillionaire Canadian businessman Sam Blythe, wanted to help the PM out. He got in touch with Sharp, who arranged a meeting between the businessman and the Cabinet Office. This led to Blythe providing an £800,000 loan guarantee to Johnson. That's almost $1 million guarantee. Then, in January, Sharp was named the government's preferred candidate for the BBC chair role. During the pre-appointment hearing, Sharp did not mention his role in facilitating the loan for Johnson. On February 16, 2021, Sharp formally took up the role of BBC chairman. The appointment is for 4 years. The loan saga was forgotten for the last 2 years. Then, the details were made public by the media on January 21, 2023. Over the last few weeks, it's been bedlam. BBC staffers are livid. Opposition MPs have been calling for Sharp's resignation. The parliamentary report says his omissions constitute a breach of the standards expected of individuals applying for prominent public appointments. The BBC's reputation has taken a hit. The scandal throws it open to accusation that it's been compromised. Ironically, it's mostly the Tories who've been criticizing the BBC's impartiality. Now, their own links to Sharp have further damaged the BBC. Labour MP and Shadow Culture Secretary Lucy Powell has called the committee's report damning. She says Sharp's position is increasingly untenable. So will the chair step down? Well, Sharp seems to be dragging his feet. He's been apologizing for his actions, but there have been no resignation hints yet. He seems to be waiting for an independent inquiry to conclude. There's also a separate internal investigation by the BBC examining conflicts of interest. But is this all an eyewash? The chair selection is a political appointment. The BBC itself has said it plays no role in the recruitment of the chair. So when the chair is chosen by the powers that be, how can it ever be completely impartial? There will always be accusations of favours being traded. After this fiasco, the BBC chairs risk being seen as government agents, or worse. For a broadcaster that prides itself in lecturing governments and making investigative documentaries, the scandal could not have come at a worse time.
And now it's time to wrap up with Vantage shots, images that tell the story. Israel saw protests, both inside and outside the lawmakers' chambers, against the Netanyahu's government's judiciary plan. Israeli lawmakers engaged in a shouting match in a parliamentary committee meeting, deciding on the plans to overhaul the judiciary. Meanwhile, thousands flocked to Jerusalem to protest against the move. Spain is known for its beautiful almond blossoms, but this year, its almond trees are blooming a month early, thanks to climate change. Rio de Janeiro held a spiritual cleanse. This came ahead of its iconic carnival. We're leaving you with these images. Thanks very much for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
תוציאו אותם בבקשה.